Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. It's your boy, the Diggity Doodah Dog, Mr. Pepitoy Panther, here with the Wobbly Wildcard for another episode of the Niggly Niche Cast at a time when shit appears to be hitting the fan in the USA. Not in a good way, but hey, something's got to change in this world, and obviously the niche case is all about love, peace, love, prosperity. Doesn't matter who you are; it's just about the human race. So, goes without saying how we feel about such matters, and yeah, so we won't really talk about that. We care about it. We won't really talk about it too much more, other than just love and positive vibrations out there to the world. And today we are going to be discussing a lot of NRL matters. We'll be looking back on round 3, the NRL restart, and then we'll be looking forward to this weekend's games as well. Just talking a bunch of NRL shit with the Wobbly Wildcard, who is a supporter of the Dragons, and the Dragons are up Schitt's Creek right now. Before I throw to the Wobbly Wildcard, though, you can sign up to the Niche Case email newsletter, where we drop a bunch of different little thoughts and ideas and stuff to share. So sign up to that. Links are all over our social media. And if you enjoy what we're doing, jump on Patreon, support us straight up the guts. Wobbly Wildcard, how are ya? You can say anything you want about the situation in the world and the USA. And after you've done a bit of that, what's crack-a-lacking with the Dragons?
Yeah, right. The how am I thing almost feels like a bit of a trick question, considering we're going to probably be talking a fair bit about that Warriors-Dragons game. But I don't know, I'm in a bit of a weird place anyway, because I'm not recording in my usual setup. I've got a extremely sort of number 8 wire thing going here out in the shed, where we're having to do it over the phone line because the Wi-Fi doesn't reach too well out here, because where I usually record poured with rain over the weekend, flooded a little bit. It's all fine now in terms of like the bloody dampness or whatever, but it stanks in there, so I don't really want to be in there at the moment. So I thought about going into just in the lounge because no one else is around at the moment, but then the dog would have been barking at me and lapping up and being an annoying little bugger. I mean, he ate a packet of Oreos just before. That's why I was a little bit late in calling, because I had to get these buggers off him, and as soon as he go near him, he growled. Anyway, that was a bit of a pain in the ass, but I've set myself up on a little deck chair in the shed because there's no tables in here or anything. I've got the computer propped up on just like a plastic box sitting across another thing, and a microphone perched just underneath it. It might not be the best on my back, but I'm hoping we'll be able to get through a quality podcast all the same. I don't have anything new to say about the stuff that's happening around the world. It's sort of like ripping a Band-Aid off in a way, is like stuff like ugliness that you got to get through, I think, because it's been lacking that sort of like sunlight exposure for too long, and you got to maybe put up with some bad eggs looting or whatever through that. It's just kind of the way it goes. It's all for a bigger purpose. So I'm actually this sounds like a savage thing to say, but I'm kind of enjoying a lot of that kind of stuff. It's also infuriating. Like it's like enraging to see, particularly the way like police are acting and all that. But I like that, shit's all hitting the fan. I think it had to happen eventually. You can't push people up against the wall for so long and expect no reaction. But yeah, I don't want to dwell on that. I don't really want to bloody dwell on the Dragons Warriors either, but I suppose we should. I don't know. Is that where we're going to start here, Doc?
Yeah, we don't necessarily need to break down the Dragons because to me that game just felt exactly how we had expressed in the preview, because you've just got a situation where you've got a team that should be good but quite clearly isn't good, and a lot of different levels of just a mediocre footy club. So unless you want to go deep into the Dragons rabbit hole, I'm not too fast. I do want to do a bit on the Warriors and break down some things with the Warriors that were very interesting from that Dragons game, because I think in assessing the Warriors' performance wildcard, it's far more like the Warriors in that game and being good and winning the game. There's greater complexities to that than there are greater complexities to the Dragons being shit. Like, they just seem like a classic case of a club or a team, like they just suck. Like, they're not playing for their coach, they're not connecting. It's just a classic case of not a classic case, because you got other bad teams like the Titans and maybe the Bulldogs who just blatantly don't quite have the skill, but the Dragons have a good team that isn't performing well, and that just seems like a more regular occurrence. So I do want to spend a bit more time on the Warriors than the Dragons here wildcard, and I'm sure you won't mind that.
No, well, we're also going to have majority Warriors fans listening, so it makes perfect sense. I don't think it's as big of a drastic case with the Dragons as has been. But as soon as that game ended, all they did was talk about on the Fox coverage was about how bad the Dragons were. It's like, well, I thought the Warriors were pretty bloody good. Like, the Warriors were better than the Dragons were bad. It was, what was the score, 18-0? I mean, anytime you get blanked is not a good look. And the Dragons' attack was pretty lifeless. But, I mean, they also had almost no territory because the Warriors just controlled the game. Like, there were two teams probably that quite like the arm wrestle type of thing, and the Dragons, the Warriors got out in front early because of a Dragons error, and that was almost that. Like, neither team, like, the momentum did not change for the entire rest of that contest. Like, that was the way, even if it wasn't a major, like, the Warriors weren't tearing the Dragons apart, the Dragons actually defended quite well. Like, Cam McInnes made 74 tackles or something ridiculous. But the Warriors did not make an error, literally did not make an error for 74 and a half minutes or something like that. And the Dragons, at the moment, are, like you said, a team lacking in confidence, a team with a bit of disconnect there between who they are and who they should be, disconnect between the messages that are coming to the players and the performances that the players are putting out there, particularly as a cohesive unit, which is the thing that's lacking the most. Is they don't seem like a team that's playing as a team, whereas the Warriors were exactly that. But with that, they also had several just outstanding performances going above and beyond for the team. So I think it was a terrible time to be playing the Warriors, because that first game after the thing was also always the time where they were going to be the most focused, and if they had lost that first game, things could have gotten a little bit rotten, as they are for the Dragons currently. But getting that win for the Warriors in the way that they did is pretty, enormously morale boosting going forward, because now they've got the template. It's just a question of, I don't know if you'll have answers to this, but it's a question of whether they can repeat that against other teams who are going to have fewer obvious dominatable weaknesses than what the Dragons did in that game. Is the only thing, is whether that template is actually going to work against the Roosters or the Eels or the Raiders or whoever. That's the question for the Warriors. But you got to walk before you can run. They were winless over the first two games, looking absolutely terrible. Here we had an outstanding performance from the Warriors, and so you only beat who you're playing on the day, and they thoroughly beat the Dragons. So I gotta cop that one, I suppose.
Is in terms of the Warriors winning that game, it's about as amazing a performance as I can remember from the Warriors, just in terms of a complete game of footy. They weren't overly amazing. They could have been a lot better, and they could have done a lot better and absolutely destroyed the Dragons. I agree with that line of thinking that's coming out of a few Australian pundits. But as far as the total package and delivering, given the circumstance, it was epic. But it's also involved a few key details that may or may not be repeated moving forward. And the main one of those is Tohu Harris playing in the middle. He's named in the number 12 jersey to face the Panthers. So you got Eliasar Katoa named on an edge, Tohu Harris named on an edge, and Isaiah Papali'i named in the middle. So we have a case where, now that's how the team was named for the Dragons game as well. And as far as back row middles and edges going, Stephen Kearney does often. There's little correlation between the team named on a Tuesday and actual positions played. But Tohu Harris playing through the middle, this is the first time he's played specifically in the middle, let alone 80 minutes in the middle of the field as well. And this hasn't happened before. So the Warriors, the way I view this is there was a significant positional shift with Tohu Harris, and it worked, and that should be the blueprint moving forward. And I'm not saying that's the reason why the Warriors were so good, but beating the Dragons 18-0 came about with something we haven't seen before in terms of Tohu Harris playing through the middle. Massive numbers, 21 runs, 219 meters, so well over 10 meters per run on 21 runs is absolutely bonkers, let alone some defensive numbers as well that I'll slide across here. That were equally as impressive for Tohu Harris. 48 tackles for Tohu Harris and 1 miss. So he made 48 tackles at 96% efficiency. Now, the Warriors missed a shitload of tackles in that game. They actually missed more tackles than the Dragons did in that game, with the major culprits being Cody Nikorima and Blake Green. But Tohu Harris, I remember the last year he was at the Melbourne Storm. The Melbourne Storm, this might be super footy nerdy of me and overstating it a bit, but I did see that when the Melbourne Storm were defending, Tohu Harris would defend a couple spots infield than a standard edge forward will. So usually in the NRL, edge forwards are going to be defending inside their centre, wing and half. Tohu Harris, so they're the fourth player in from the sideline in theory. Tohu Harris might be the fifth player or sixth player in from the sideline, which means he's straight up in the middle. And Tohu Harris is, he's a brilliant edge forward because he's got the footwork, because he's got the skills, he's a good defender. That's what makes him a top tier edge forward. But that also works in the middle. He's a big lad, he's one of the biggest Warriors in the team. So that adds a bit of size to the middle. He's mobile so he can defend really well. He's a unit so he can wrap blokes up, play the ball down. He's got the footwork to make meters. He averaged big meters in that game. And this is the single most important thing about that Warriors victory. And moving forward to the Penrith Panthers this weekend coming up on Friday night, Tohu Harris has to play in the middle of the field. And this highlights, you really have to take these team lists announced on a Tuesday with a grain of salt because 22 blokes are named. And those 22 blokes could come out in any which way come game time. So I do not believe Stephen Kearney is going to play Katoa and Tohu Harris on an edge. He's going to play Katoa and Isaiah Papali'i. Papali'i was pretty good. Katoa was once again fantastic. So there's no reason to change that combination that worked so well against the Dragons. In my mind, was the main major factor in the Warriors winning that game as they did. There's no reason for Kearney to change that moving forward, even though the team list is how it is.
Yeah, Tohu Harris was amazing in that game. And, if he's amazing in that game, then you tell him to do the exact same thing in every other game. You don't go changing that. And this was the first time I'd properly watched Eliasar Katoa as well, and he's a bloody, there's a prospect and a half for you right there, eh? That dude's quality. I haven't seen a forward coming through the Warriors in the last couple of years on that level, that's for sure.
I'm glad you brought up Katoa there, Wildcard, because there's actually a fantastic story behind Katoa, and obviously people are going to, the general gist of that story, everyone knows. Katoa, playing for a Tongan age group team, pretty much a perennial Tongan representative, straight out in Tonga, and then offered a scholarship by Tamaki College, and then leaves Tamaki College to join the Warriors. That story is going to be everyone's going to know that story if they don't already now. Katoa being an absolute monster for the Warriors is going to help that, spread that story around. But anyone in New Zealand who knows First 15 rugby and sees Tamaki College handing out a scholarship, that's strange. And all due respect to Tamaki College, which is a predominantly Tongan school, like a majority Tongan population, in Glen Innes, which is a lower decile area in East Auckland, surrounded by, higher decile, higher socioeconomic areas. It's like a little pocket near some very wealthy suburbs. So Tamaki College, where they were a 1B school and they were coming into 1A, and they saw Katoa was playing against Tamaki College for the Tongan age group team that he was playing for. Tamaki College don't really have scholarships, and all they offered Katoa was a place at their school, and Katoa had a family member who went to the school, so he stayed with the family member. It's not like Tamaki College is gifting out a $30,000 fee scholarship to their school, staying in the student accommodation, which is what Kings, what St. Kitts, what Auckland Grammar, what Mount Albert do, depending, obviously, fee variance is present there. Tamaki College has none of that. They're a tiny school in Auckland, and so that's crazy. It's crazy that Tamaki College did offer him a scholarship, and people are going to see that and think Tamaki College offered him this and this and this, and no, they just whatever fees they have, they made sure those were taken care of, and Katoa lived with a family member in Glen Innes. This isn't a case of a big First 15 school signing a highly prized player out of the Pacific Islands, which they always do. This is a very small school. It doesn't make any sense. So that needs to be made very clear. And then coming out of school, Katoa was in the Blues under 18 squad in 2018, I think it was, alongside someone like Christian Tuipulotu, who is now with the Roosters. And he had all sorts of offers, but it was the immediacy of the financials and professional system that the NRL offers, which is why he chose the Warriors. Because he's getting a professional contract straight away, and as Katoa has said numerous times, he's here to provide for his family. So there's no point in Katoa taking the rugby route, because then you've got to be a semi-professional, definitely earning less than $100,000. You might play NPC, and if you do well in the NPC, you might get a Super Rugby contract. It's very strange or rare for a First 15 player to go straight from high school into Super Rugby. Katoa got signed from the Warriors, and he leaves school and he goes into a professional setup. He only played half the season for the Jersey Flegg under-20s team, but he is on a professional deal and he's in a professional club. And he just snaps up that opportunity. Massive work ethic, fantastic attitude, which is what the Warriors basically saw, and how Katoa has risen so dramatically. So I think it's a very interesting idea, and to me it's very interesting in the sense that it shows where league and union are positioned at the moment, and perhaps some positives and challenges for either code. But it just needs to be said how ridiculous and how just a strange circumstance of a school in Auckland who I'd imagine don't dish out too many scholarships, maybe not even one since Katoa's been there. Bringing Katoa over from Tonga to play what they did ended up playing 1A rugby, so Katoa got to play 1A rugby in Auckland. And then the challenge that is facing a lot of union players coming out of high school, that's where the battle between Super Rugby and NRL is, because NRL clubs can bring in the professional elements a lot quicker than rugby union can.
That's such an incredible story, yeah. And then am I right also in saying that this is only like, even now as he's playing first grade NRL, it's only like he's only played like a dozen like legit organized NRL rugby league, like not NRL but rugby league games full stop. Is that right? I saw that on Twitter the other day.
Yeah, because he was
a late convert and all that.
Rugby union all through Tonga, comes to Tamaki College, plays rugby union for Tamaki College, comes out of Tamaki College, misses the first half of the Jersey Flegg season. So then he only plays like the back end of the Jersey Flegg season. Those are his first like cluster of rugby league games. And then we come into this season. But even I remember looking at the Jersey Flegg team list last year, and you could see the progression. Like, you could see 1 week he's named on the bench. Next week he's named edge forward starting. And then the next week after that, he's named as the starting middle forward. That's how it played out, just looking at team sheets for the Flegg team last year. So yeah, and he was fantastic against the Dragons once again. He 29 tackles, only missed 2 of them. 181 meters from 18 runs, which is again 10 meters per run. Scored a try. Oh, he looks like a gun for the Warriors. I reckon he's the best forward prospect coming out of the Warriors in a long, long time. Like, you compare him to some of the other forwards that have come through the Warriors. Katoa, in the nicest way possible, takes a big old poo all over them.
Yeah, well, they haven't really had a lot of great forwards coming through, and they had a little mini era where you had like Simon Mannering, Ben Matalino, guys like that, and then it's just sort of, I don't know, the last 3 or 4 years there just have been a lot of guys in that sort of Sam Lasone mold where it's like they look good, like they have the tools, but they don't quite like click it at first grade, and there's a little experiment that goes on for a little while, and then they move on to the next prospect, and then that guy does the same cycle sort of thing. They haven't really had one who sticks for a while. Like, their top forwards have been guys like Harris and maybe Adam Blair. I mean, that might be controversial. He's been a little bit up and down at times. So he played good against the Dragons, though, unfortunately. It's one of those ones where, like, I was just waiting for the Warriors to make mistakes and just assuming the Dragons keep it nice and tight. The Warriors had dropped the ball a few times and whatever. It was the other way around. It was the Dragons who made the mistakes. They just felt their own pressure, and it was not fun to watch. But yeah, the composure from the Warriors was bloody good, especially because, like, talking about the forward pack, the thing I had said and thinking the Dragons should be able to win this game when we were previewing it, humiliatingly, my prediction's not looking too great right now, but, like, I thought that the strength of the Dragons, and it still is their forward pack, and I thought their forward pack would be able to bully the Warriors forward pack into just, maybe not physically, but just like in terms of just intensity, like they could win that particular arm wrestle and then just force mistakes and things like that. And what happened was it worked the exact opposite way. The Warriors dominated the strength of the Dragons, and then because they did that, they exposed the weakness of the Dragons, which is their like back five not being able to offer any kind of like solidarity, just a bunch of inexperienced players. Jordan Pereira, I thought, had a decent enough game. Matt Duffy did not, and he was dropped subsequently. The halves then were exposed because they didn't have the go forward in front of them, and Ben Hunt is not a creative player, he's a reactive player, it seems to me. He's a guy who will do great if you give him the platform to do great, and if you don't, he's going to look a little wobbly, and his kicking game is up and down as it is anyway. And not nearly enough from Corey Norman, unfortunately. Dragons played down the side of their field, which they were worse at, and maybe that's also... It could have been a Warriors tactic, could have just been the Dragons just going through the motions and getting stuck, because they definitely played their game like they were stuck in the mud. There were a few other Warriors players that like stood out drastically, apart from some like the guys we've already mentioned. I thought, I don't know if I'd say he had an outstanding game overall. You already mentioned that he missed a few tackles, but Cody Nikorima actually like running the ball, and there was that line break that led to the third try, and just just that little, he's got that little bit of footwork, and he's bloody quick off the mark, and he's like, when he brings that aspect of his game, because I am one of the people who didn't think he ought to be a starting half for this team. I thought, like, he's same thing as they're saying about Ben Hunt at the moment, actually, which is a bit unfair on Ben Hunt, but like, considering no one else around him was playing well, I don't know why he's the lightning rod for everything, but like McKenna straight after the game was like, well, maybe he should just do what he does in Origin and for Australia, and just be that, like, wear the number 14 jersey, be the guy, the extra playmaker coming off the bench kind of thing, which we know Cody Nikarima is good at because he's done it before plenty of times. By the way, Ben Hunt doing that role for Australia is very different to doing that role for New Zealand, for the Dragons. It's not exactly like you gotta look at the quality of half who will be playing there for the Dragons, and the quality of half he can't get in ahead of for Australia. It's a very, very different story. But yeah, I mean, Cody Nikarima running the ball. What do you reckon?
Yeah, good. As long as he's running the ball, like, that's the thing with Sean Johnson and Cody Nikarima. They have to run the footy to really impact a game. Like, Sean Johnson can impact a game with his kicking, with his passing, but for him to be at his best, he has to make a concerted effort to run the footy and be dangerous running the footy. It's the same with Nikarima, but it's so much more important, I think, for Nikarima with Blake Green, because he's got speed. And Nikarima's speed set up Katoa's try, because he was able to skip past Tarek Sims and isolate Ben Hunt on that edge. Now, if that's Blake Green, it's not going to work because you're not quick enough. But Nikarima boosted it and got on the outside. And then also, you mentioned that line break that led to Nikarima's try. That came from a dummy half run. And another key aspect of the Warriors' performance against the Dragons was dummy half running, because you had Nikarima. That was his only dummy half run. But with the rule change, I think the biggest area of change, like the biggest area on the field, is the area behind the ruck. And Cameron McInnes, like you mentioned his number of tackles, he fucked up on that play because he went straight to target. Like, he rushed up off the line to put pressure on Jermaine Tanoa-Brown, which left that massive space behind the ruck, which we're seeing now because of the rule changes, the greater speed. The markers don't quite have the time to set up, and there's just bigger space around that area. Cameron McInnes created that space by rushing up on Jermaine Tanoa-Brown. Cody Nikarima boosted it through the middle. And then you look at Gerard Beale had 2 runs out of dummy half for 20 metres. So that's the 10 metres per run thing. It's very easy to imagine it in the context of a big bopper running it up the guts. But you got to put it in this way. Like, every time he runs out of dummy half, he's making 10 metres, which is huge. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, though, he had 7 dummy half runs for 76 metres. Now, the first 2 games, the outside backs, from those first 2 games combined, they had 7 dummy half runs. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck had 7 dummy half runs in the one game. So we're talking about key Warriors changes or aspects of their play, stylistic elements. You've got Nikarima coming into the halves, definitely beneficial. Tohu Harris moving to the middle, definitely beneficial. More dummy half running, definitely beneficial. Because obviously you got more space. It ties in the defenders. They have to focus more on the ruck area. Like, in that instance, Cameron McInnes, he didn't respect the dummy half running of Nikarima. Because if he did, he would have stayed a bit safer, moved a bit slower, made sure that Nikarima actually passed the ball before rushing up on Tanoa-Brown. So now teams have to respect that a little bit more, shuffle in a bit more, that open space out wider. Like dummy half running, and I talked about it a lot after those first 2 games where there wasn't much dummy half running, and it's so important. And it's hard to like put your head on dummy half running as being a crucial element, but because you got to explain it and then, you know, blah, blah, blah. But for the Warriors team, especially when you've got So Nikorima's in the halves, and Carl Lawton has to spend 55 minutes playing at centre, which he did really well. And then I look at the team name this week, and Jack Murchie's on the bench. Pawasa Fa'amasili is on the bench. I'd like to talk about that wildcard. And King Vuniyayawa, Josh Curran. Even the extended bench, there's no dummy half on the extended bench because Carl Lawton is named starting centre. So there's no extra dummy half spice, apparently, for the team to face Penrith Panthers. And you have Wade Egan, who he only had 3 dummy half runs for 15 metres. He's a fine dummy half. I'm interested to see how he goes with more games. Good passer, played 80 minutes. He had to play 80 minutes against the Dragons. 43 tackles, 95.6 efficiency. Decent game from Wade Egan, but he's not a Isaac Luke. Cody Nikorima, when he was at the Broncos coming off the bench, he was amazing. Damien Cook, Wade Egan doesn't strike me as that kind of dummy half where he's going to zip out a dummy half, and that's fine. But that's when you need outside backs getting into dummy half, especially someone like Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. Holy cow. That dude's absolutely freak running the footy. So, of course, you want him scooting around dummy half. That's why he had over 10 metres per run coming out of dummy half. So that is really important for the Warriors, is getting some of their outside backs into dummy half and being effective out of dummy half. It just helps them so much, helps the big boppers, helps generate momentum, helps scatter the defence, which is also beneficial. So I think those are the 3 key elements that I saw with the Warriors, was dummy half running, Nikorima in the halves, and Tohu Harris playing through the middle.
Yeah, Tuivasa-Sheck was amazing. He's always amazing, and he was amazing once more in this game. Just like one of those dudes who's just, there's like a guarantee with him that he's going to get a certain amount of meters, that he's going to be able to shift his feet just as he hits the line so that he's not being pushed backwards or anything like that. Compare that to someone like Matt Duffy, whose size is the thing that's going to hold him back in the NRL. He just, every time he runs the ball up, he's quick, he makes good meters, until he hits the line, and then he gets shoved backwards, and then he's having to roll over and pick himself up, and the defense is coming forward at him now, and the next play is already under pressure kind of thing. Whereas Tuivasa-Sheck just gives you that momentum immediately, and he builds on momentum as well. I wonder, when you're talking about dummy half running, I wonder if that's also both cause and effect. It helps you, is one of those things where it helps you get on top of a team, but also it's one of those things which comes out when you are on top of a team. When you are, when that other team is just being that little bit slower, they've been defending a lot, then that's when you really get that opportunity to punish teams like that as well, which I think the Warriors in the second half in particular did absolutely brilliantly at. It was just continuing to get those meters through their sets, make sure they got a deep kick, make sure the Dragons were playing off their line pretty much every single time. And it was just it just ground them down, and the rare chances they had, they're only in the Warriors 20 about 3 times all game. And when they got there, they panicked because they didn't know what to do, because they felt the pressure knowing that this was such a rare opportunity. I mean, there was one early on where I think, was it Zach Lomax got tackled a meter short of the try line sort of thing. Maybe if he'd scored there, that could have been a different game. But once it got second half in particular, and once the Warriors were on top and actually in control of the game, the Dragons felt that pressure of just not knowing, when you get a rare opportunity and you know this is a rare opportunity, it's we have to take this chance because we might not get another one. And then because you're feeling you're putting that pressure on yourself, and it comes from lack of belief, and it comes from being dominated through the game and all those things. But yeah, troubling signs for the Dragons. The Isaac Luke, you mentioned, he's back on the bench for the game against they're playing the Bulldogs this week I think it's on Monday. So how bad's that going to be? If you thought the Dragons were bad against the Warriors, they're playing a second week in a row. They're going to be playing a team that's actually below them on the ladder on points difference. Another winless team. Well, hey, only one of them will be winless at the end. Unless we get another draw. We did get that was the one game I didn't watch this weekend. I was watching heaps of the NRL. I guess there was nothing else on, and it was just something to always have on the telly or in the background or just streaming on the phone or whatever. And like, I watched basically every single game this week. I missed the start of the Manly game, and I missed the game before that, which was Panthers Knights, which was a bloody Golden Point tie, and everyone's saying what an incredible watch it was for the last second half onwards. And like, that's the one game I didn't watch, man. But to be fair, like, the quality of the league was pretty high for first round back after a long break. I mean, the rule changes getting the focus of it, and I almost wonder if that's one of those things, like, because why would they bring in a rule change at this point of the season? Like, the season is actually ongoing. Like, they'd already had 2 weeks. It seems like a weird, like, that's the sort of thing surely you do at the start of the year. But I mean, this is sort of like the start of the year, but it's not. I mean, they're still counting those games, even though they maybe shouldn't. But whatever, that's a personal opinion. I almost had like I know it's a little bit cynical. I almost had like the idea, like maybe they just changed the rules so that people would talk about the rules rather than talking about the fact that there's no crowds and that the NRL has been weird with the way a lot of these things have handled, and like CEO got turned over during the hiatus and all that, and, you know, various other things that could be lockdown breaches and things like that, various other things that could have been the focus. Maybe they'll just focus on the rule change if we give them a snappy new rule change. And I mean, whether that was a deliberate ploy or not, it bloody worked. Everyone's talking about the thing. And I think the Dragons are a team that I think they don't shape very well to handle that rule change. It's one that goes against the way they prefer to play. And one that I think the Warriors would have been on the fence for, but I mean, as you already just described there, it's one the Warriors made a couple nice adjustments for and were bloody outstanding for. You did say you wanted to mention old what's-his-face on the bench. Are there any other players as well, though, that you want to mention from that game that just particular standouts? I think we've been through a couple. There were, I mean, no one played badly is the thing. I could say, like, Ken Mamalo had a decent game, like getting those early meters and flawless under well, he didn't have to take too many high. I'd noticed as well that Tuivasa-Sheck was shifting the ball from those deep kicks as well a little bit, so the Warriors were attacking sort of like from the edge in and a bit, and probably a deliberate thing. But I don't know, anyone else you want to mention, or should we get straight into the your other point to mention?
Yeah, crikey, Jack, you went the long way around there. And far too much Dragons talk.
That's it. There's no more Dragons talk.
Roger Tuivasa-Sheck had 15 passes, so I will keep an eye on that moving forward. Pass to run ratio of 0.6 passes to each receipt he had. So I will keep an eye on that, just more passes. I do appreciate that insight of the passes off the kick returns, because what needs to happen, and you mentioned Mamalo, like you said, everyone was good. So it's hard to like really nail to like say this player had 10 meters per run. Like all the forwards were monstrous. Mamalo, 26 runs, 282 meters. So both Mamalo, Tuivasa-Sheck averaged well over 10 meters per run, which is great. Starts the sets perfectly. But the Warriors need to get Mamalo in different positions, because it's the old Manu Vatuvai thing, like one pass off the ruck, suddenly you're running into 3 forwards who can deal with a big winger. But if Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's getting the ball straight off a kick, pass to Mamalo, then Mamalo can target, the center or the half on the other edge. Even if Mamalo's getting the ball off a ruck play, they might do it 2 passes off the ruck, just to get Mamalo running a bit wider. So always pay attention to how Mamalo is being used, because they have to be creative. As Warriors fans, we know, and I vividly remember this, teams adjusted to how Vatuvai was being used as a battering ram later in his career. Just moving forward, we'll wrap up the Warriors talk and then we'll get into that wider narrative, because I do think there's a lot of interesting ideas. But this week, Poasa Fa'amasili comes in. He's from the Roosters. The Warriors signed him on a loan deal. At the time, I said he's not going to play. Like, I had said that everywhere. He's not going to play. Here he is named on the bench. No Ignatius Parsi. So obviously the Warriors' forward stocks are a bit depleted, even more so than when they actually got Fa'amasili from the Roosters. Like, they've had to, I think Parsi's suspended. But this is, like, Jack Murchie. I really like Jack Murchie. He's a massive unit. Fa'amasili is a decent middle forward. Interesting to see how he goes this weekend. King Yawa looked like a effective middle forward. Offers a bit of aggression, energy, and then Josh Curran on the bench. No utility on that bench, so Harris Tavita might be a late inclusion. But it is important to note that Fa'amasili is on the Warriors bench this week, and be interesting to see how this plays out, because if he's really good, the Warriors might want to keep him, but he is, I don't know, the Roosters don't like to let those players go. Like, if they sign, the Roosters do a great job of signing players from New Zealand, Pawasa Fa'amasili, Glenora Beers Jr. They have great scouting and recruitment, so that, like, I just don't think the Roosters are going to let Fa'amasili go knowing him as well as they do. Very interesting game for the Warriors against the Panthers this weekend. You mentioned the, what was it, going back to the dummy half running and the rules change and the little blokes. I did a bit yesterday. I wrote about it and I tweeted some stuff about forward numbers. The rules have changed. The game's faster, and it's all about bringing the little blokes into the equation, which everyone says that, but I don't think anyone thinks like about Stacey Jones. Like, I don't like Stacey Jones is an older example, but little blokes have been dominating the NRL in the last 5-10 years during the wrestle era anyway. Like, little blokes have always done well. If you're a good little bloke, like Damien Cook ran the footy when wrestling was still a massive part of the NRL. Like, little blokes are going to be effective and dangerous no matter what. But my premise and my general idea, the forwards across the NRL put up absolutely massive numbers. Like, the amount of forwards averaging 10 meters per run felt more than before. It's hard to get it down to a science, but it felt more than before. It definitely felt like a buck against the trend of the game being so fast and it's all about the little blokes, it's all about fatigue and attrition. I saw forwards absolutely dominating the middle of the field. And so rugby league's still rugby league. So if you want your little blokes to be effective and you want your speed and your footwork, you still need quick play the balls. You still need a dominant forward pack. So I'm not necessarily like exposing that idea, but it is important to note that this is still about forwards rolling down the field. And if you've got that kind of forward pack, you're still going to be good.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it was almost like a novelty to talk about at first with the rule change kind of things. And I'm not sure, like, do they count them as penalties, by the way? Because I don't think they do, I think it just counts as a set restart, because the penalty count was extremely low in the Warriors game, for one thing. When I know there were at least a couple, like, sort of like little chains of those restarts. Where I think both teams had one in the first half where there were like multiple in the same possession. So, yeah, I mean, it speeds the game up, but it only speeds the game up if you're giving away penalties in the ruck, right? Like, other than that, it doesn't affect the way a guy, like, one pass out hits up the line. Like, it doesn't change that. It doesn't change how hard Jason Taumalolo's coming running at you, sort of thing, right? It's not like a fundamental change, like it's almost been presented as a little bit in some of the conversations about it. It's just like this one area where the game was being dragged down, like where it was being slowed, for better or for worse. Like, I'm not going to say that was necessarily a bad thing, because I don't mind, like, I mean, I watch NFL, so I don't mind a break and play, catch your breath kind of thing. It's fine. But, like, it's, as long as it's purposeful. But, like, I don't know that it was quite the revolutionary aspect that's going to change it. But, like, if you are a quick, nippy, dummy half type, you are going to bloody love it, because it's that quick reset while the other team is still on their heels, trying to get back, and suddenly tackle 0, tackle 1, I forget, straight up, like, it's your old, like, I don't know, running at the dudes when they're already backing up is the best thing for a guy like a Damien Cook or whoever. And yeah, that's there's certain teams that are going to cope with that better. It is only one aspect of the game. Like there are many others, but there are teams that are just seem like so perfectly. I mean, I think the Raiders are another one just because of the way they seem to be able to roll, and they got a hooker who can control the game in a variety of ways as well, like off the boot, off the, nipping around, defending through the passes. Like it is. If you've got a dude like Hodgson who's as well-rounded as that, I think, I don't know, I wonder if, because for a while there, the focus was on, like, the fullback. Like, all the great teams had, I'm talking, like, sort of 5-10 years ago, all the great teams had a top-level fullback. And maybe now that's shifting just a little bit towards hookers. I don't know, but that's just a theory. Like, that's just prospecting into the future. I don't...
Can I...
Yeah, I don't know that it's a fundamental change.
I had this thought, so I had to stop you there and pipe up. I don't agree with you. I think, well, I know it's just a theory you were chucking out, but because I had this specific thought. I was watching Tommy Trebojevic, and I was like, Tom Trebojevic is as good as James Tedesco, and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck is as good as Tom Trebojevic. All these dudes are great fullbacks. Like, I can't sit here and say that Tom Trebojevic is better than James Tedesco. I can't say Roger Tuivasa-Sheck is better than Tom Trebojevic. I can say that they're all as good as each other because that's how it feels. And I think we're exceptionally lucky to be working with such great fullbacks. And other teams have great fullbacks. Like other teams have very threatening fullbacks. Valentine Holmes, Ryan Pappenhausen, off the top of my head, Gutherson's effective. But I think those three fullbacks, Tom Trebojevic, James Tedesco, and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, are operating at a different level, but they're all doing it together. Like I think when we talk about, or when other Australian media talk about like who's the best fullback, they make it seem so easy, or who's the best player. Like I'm just looking at those three fullbacks and their impact on a game of rugby league. It's a pleasure to watch. I especially love Tom Trebojevic. Like, I might break down the play he did with Jake Trebojevic. They had a little set play involving Daly Cherry Evans. I think Curtis Surinam was running a line as well. Tommy Turbo wraps around the back and goes straight through a gap. Like Tom Trebojevic is legit as fuck. And Jake Trebojevic is obviously very good as well. But I don't know, like how do you... Let's get into some chat about like just who you think some of the best players are and some of the best, how they fit into the best teams. We don't necessarily, I kind of want to see a bit more footy played before talking about teams. Like it's, you're going to look at the Melbourne Storm and be like, oh, they lost to the Canberra Raiders. Let's just let a couple games play out and let teams adjust to new rules and build some cohesion and chemistry and stuff like that. But as far as players go, Wildcard, like who are your favorite players? Who are like your undercover, underrated players? Give us a bit of that chat from round 3.
Well, the Raiders went further than the Storm last season as well, so that shouldn't even be an upset, technically. I mean, both those teams are stacked with players that are amazing to watch. I don't know, single some out. I thought that Manly were outstanding against the Bulldogs, and like, I always thought he was a little bit of a Weasley fella, and he had his little dramas with the old backflip back in the day, and then there was he's often come across as a bit of a like a little whiny bugger, and when it comes to media and stuff as well. But I mean, Daly Cherry Evans, the way he played throughout last season was just like pure halfback gold. Like you can't you can't like play at a higher level than that. I thought he was incredible, and it's so much fun to watch as well because he's quick off the mark. He can run. His kicking game is incredible, and he's got a like great eye for just playmaking and stuff like that. And he's someone who's changed like almost a 180 over the last probably 12 months in my kind of estimations. Not that he wasn't a good player before, just that I think he's sort of like reached his final form at this time. There's plenty others I could get into on similar thing? I don't know. All the usuals, your Taumalolos, your various, basically everybody in the Melbourne Storm. Like, there's a long list of players who would be on that sort of like top tier and on the fringes thereof.
Couple I think they're from that general upper echelon. Definitely Tom. I love the Turbo brothers, Trebojevic brothers. They're amazing. They're beautiful.
I hate how much I like watching Manly play these days. I hate it, but I also love it because I love it. But I hate that I love it.
And that has to involve a shout out to Danny Levi from Wellington. I think I mentioned it last time. Like, part of the Manly Seagulls' brilliance involved Manasi Fainu and also Upside Kotosau, who's now with the Penrith Panthers. Like, they were so instrumental in the Manly Seagulls last season. Manly lose both of them. Kotosau moves on because the Manly Seagulls want to invest more in Manasi Fainu. Then Manasi Fainu has his off-field incident, and then Danny Levi goes to the Manly Seagulls, having been pretty much like shafted by Nathan Brown, and Danny Levi just fits right in, and he fits right into a good team, as you say, like very crisp, organized team. As far as like Kiwi NRL players to watch out for, a couple of like who also fit into my favorite players at the moment, Dylan Brown, fantastic for the Eels, great footwork, plays on the left edge, does a fair share of the kicking, organisation and whatnot. And then Maratani Ukore as well. Oh, he was with the Warriors. People need to remember that. He was with the Warriors. He was in their under-20s teams. He was well viewed. Like, I think he was like a captain and stuff like that. Moved across to the Eels, did a bit of edge forward, bit off the bench. Now he's just starting in the middle. He's really good. I like Maratani Ukore and think he could come into Kiwi's selection soon enough. Another one, is Moeaki Fotuaika. Now, everyone was talking about Jason Taumalolo, right? So, Jason Taumalolo, I think the number is 16 or 18. He only had to make 18 tackles. 16 tackles. So, if you're letting Jason Taumalolo make 16 tackles in a game of rugby league, and he completed those tackles at 84%, of course, Jason Taumalolo is going to take, 50,000 runs for 10,000 meters. Like, of course that's going to happen. If you're only making Jason Taumalolo make 16 tackles. However, compare that against Moeaki Fotuaika, who is a youngster, young buck, young toko, 56 minutes in the middle, 11 runs for 154 meters. I had the number, but I won't look for it. It's like, I think that's more meters per run and more post-contact meters per run than Jason Taumalolo in the same game. But the difference here, Wildcard, well, that's a major difference. But the difference, the most notable difference, is that Moeaki Fotuaika made 43 tackles at 95%. So if you're watching the Titans, always pay attention to Moeaki Fotuaika. He's from Gisborne, part of the Tongan national team. He is good at rugby league. You mentioned the Panthers versus Sharks game. No, Panthers versus Knights game.
Knights, yeah.
They didn't watch. The finish was terrible. The finish involved absolutely no clutch, and neither team really wanted, that's rough to say. Like, Matt Burton had 6 opportunities to 6 field goal attempts, and he missed all of them. 5 or 6 attempts. But he absolutely, you know how you watch someone kick a footy, drop goal or normal kick, you can tell that they are extremely talented. Like, I can tell someone is extremely talented at rugby league with how they're kicking a drop goal. Or rugby, whatever code it is. You can tell Matt Burton is sublime. Great talent. he just couldn't get his drop goal between the posts. Like, he was nailing them. He was kicking them 40, 50 meters, but he couldn't just get it between the posts. And then the Knights bombed to try to win the game as well. So not a good finish. Exciting, but it was exciting because neither team could actually win the game.
Yeah, I did wonder about that when they were talking about just how frantic and entertaining it was. It's like sometimes those games are terrible, though. I don't know. I didn't watch it, so I was just going by reputation. But that's put my mind at ease that I didn't miss too much. Those kind of like, you don't get draws accidentally in the NRL anymore, do you? Like with the golden points and such, like it doesn't happen just because two teams perfectly can't. Like there's a saying in Italian football apparently where it's like the perfect game is a 0-0 draw because it means nobody made a mistake, and that tells you a lot about Italian football, by the way. But like that's not the case in the NRL. Like if there's a draw, it doesn't mean that nobody made a mistake. It means that teams continually made mistakes more often than not. So it just means that no one made that big defensive mistake or whatever. I don't know. They can go both ways, but generally I guess you don't really get a draw where it's like just scintillating high quality NRL. Not that the bad stuff is less entertaining or anything, and sometimes it's more entertaining, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple of games that fit in that bracket. Obviously, Bulldogs versus Dragons. You got Titans versus Tigers. Tigers should win that, obviously.
Benji was good on the weekend.
Oh, was he? What? He won the Tigers the game in the last 10 minutes. He gave the cutout ball to David Noafaluma, which I also used it as an example of the space around the ruck. Benji Marshall took that space, ran the footy, and then threw a cutout ball down a short side, which set up a try. Then he got a repeat set, and from that goal line dropout, that's when David Noafaluma breaks through the defensive line and scores. So if I'm thinking about Kiwi halves here, wildcard, Benji Marshall's still really good. Dylan Brown is really good. Sean Johnson's pretty good. You got Kieran Foran coming back with the Bulldogs. Cody Nikorima's in the halves for the Warriors. Like, there's a couple of, talked about this a lot over the last 5 years. You're seeing a lot more New Zealand and Polynesian influence in playmaking positions than we've seen before. And that's definitely the case for the Kiwis halves. And thinking of Tonga, Whanatesi Niu is named on the Broncos bench. He played an international for Tonga last year, and this will be his NRL debut. So he is highly celebrated, highly decorated Broncos prospect coming into the Broncos as well. So watch out for him. But there's a lot of Kiwi halves doing good things. Jerome Hughes wasn't so good in the Storm's loss. Didn't really run the footy, which he needs to do in conjunction with his other roles. But he came off the bench for the Kiwis in recent games as well. So how many is that? You got Jerome Hughes, Kieran Foran, Sean Johnson, Benji Marshall, Cody Nikorima, Dylan Brown. That's 6 halves who are either in the Kiwis or in the Kiwis mix, which is really cool as well.
Yeah, and it would be an easy sort of narrative point for me right now to say that people don't appreciate the continuing quality and the longevity of Benji Marshall, but I don't think that's true. I think people appreciate it exactly as much as they should. I think he's pretty much beloved at this point, but it is still worth acknowledging that, and this is what I was thinking when I was watching him just sort of win that game at the end for the Tigers. It's I remember a point where, obviously he burst onto the scene and had that premiership and the famous behind the back pass, but then he had several years where his shoulder injuries where it was you didn't even know if he was going to play again. He had so many surgeries and reconstructive whatevers, and for him to be at the point where he is now, where he's 34 or something, and he must, I don't know how many games he's played, but he'd be around that 250 mark, I got to imagine. Considering what he went through injury-wise early on in his career, it really is just worth at least just keeping it in mind, watching him play, like, and even just the stuff, like, he's an incredible example of someone who's adapted their game with age and like found ways to stay effective and things like that. But yeah, just, I mean, there's a lot to say about how great Benji Marshall is in there. We don't need to add another hour to the podcast.
Not on top of the injuries, you also had the situation with the Blues. Like, it just feels...
Yeah, that's right. He went to rugby for a while. I forgot that.
It feels like perhaps Benji Marshall lost a bit of his mana during that period. So you've got the injuries, which are always going to be tough to deal with. Then you go through a situation like that with the Blues where you lose a bit of your mana and who you are and your identity and, you know, what makes you as a professional athlete. And then, like, even on his way back through the Dragons and Broncos, like, you could see signs that Benji Marshall was all class, but it was not quite there yet. And I think we're seeing it with the Tigers now, which got me, I was just thinking right then, Wildcard, like, I've got what I consider a good comparison in the NBA with Benji Marshall. Do you have like to me, he feels like a Chris Paul.
Oh, interesting.
Now, Chris Paul, maybe it's a lot better than I thought, because Chris Paul has been good throughout this whole time, but he's really hit a different spot with the Thunder recently. Like, it just seems like the best situation for Chris Paul at this stage of his career. And like, because when you're that good at that stage of your career, you know the game inside out, you know your own game inside out, and it just seems like the sport is a whole lot easier. Benji Marshall at the Tigers, it seems like the ideal fit because he's got a young, talented half alongside him. Luke Brooks. Chris Paul has a young, talented guard alongside him. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Holy shit, this is an amazing comparison.
Yeah, it's working up.
And
it's holding up.
And Benji Marshall, like, everyone talks about how his game has changed, which is true, but it's also how I expect, like, a really dynamic player. You're not going to have the speed, you're not going to have the power and the footwork, even though he does. Like, he still has sublime skills, still has great footwork, but you can't physically do what you did 10 years ago, if not like 15 years ago. But now so I just see it as more of a natural development of game as opposed to like pinpointing like Benji Marshall put all the tricks away. No, he's just naturally developed his game to be most suited to the NRL in his situation right now. And he still runs the team. Like, it's not like Luke Brooks, this is Luke Brooks' team. No, it's Benji Marshall's team. And that's how they won the game against the Sharks, was Benji Marshall stepping up in the clutch to ensure that his team won that game. And, like, we both talk a lot about enjoying Ross Taylor in the cricketing world. Like, it just feels like somehow we got graced and gifted and blessed with a better version of Ross Taylor in the like last quarter of his career, which is what this feels like. He might play for the next 10 years, but it's still the last like quarter of his career. I like going back at least 5 years. I never thought Ross Taylor would like turn into this, and I'm all here for it. I fucking love it, and I'm all here for this version of Benji Marshall. Even better if the Tigers can win some games, get in the finals. This version of Benji Marshall is only going to be enhanced.
Yeah, you said NBA comparisons to Benji Marshall, and I mean, I hadn't thought of that at all. It's not the most obvious, just thinking point watching him play. But when you said that, I am also a believer in the power of the subconscious. So when you said that, the first name that popped into my head was Tim Duncan. I don't know why exactly. I think there's many leadership qualities those two share, but then just as you're saying that, I thought Tim Duncan, maybe, you know what, maybe Manu Ginobili. And I think Manu Ginobili fits in terms of like the style, maybe not the situation and the way that Chris Paul's situation seems to fit almost perfectly, with the exception of like Chris Paul is still out there trying to win a championship and Benji got that out of the way with nice and early, although America has more of a pressure on that kind of thing. I mean, you can be a great NRL player, never win a title, no one's going to, Nathan Hindmarsh might disagree with this actually, but no one's going to like say you're a worse player for it like they do in America. But as we've established over the last few days, there's a lot that's wrong with America, so... but yeah, Manu Ginobili in terms of the style of play, I think fits quite nicely because he's also a guy who, overseas player, is one aspect of it. Manu Ginobili was one of the first guys to didn't invent it, but he really helped popularize the Euro step in the same way that Benji Marshall helped popularize like the goose step. With some of that tricky passing, like incredible vision kind of thing, a head on the swivel type play, very Benji Marshall as well. And Manu also, over the latter periods of his career when he didn't have the same athleticism he once had, he adapted his game to fit as well and was ready, like willing to play different roles for the team and kind of thing. I think there's something to that as well, that comparison with Benji Marshall.
Who do the Tigers have this week?
Not the Dragons or the Warriors.
Not huge. They got the Titans. We talked about that before. Easy win. Easy. Way more Benji Marshall. Brilliant. Let's go. Rightio, wildcard. We've emptied the rugby league tank. We'll be back later in the week with some other sporting matters to discuss. Any final thoughts there, wildcard?
I'm just thinking of going and watching some Manu Ginobili highlights, to be honest.
But of the old Manu.
Yeah, also another aspect is that Manu is a name that's also synonymous with rugby league as well, isn't it? So it works on so many levels. Some Chris Paul highlights as well, I think, just to fill out the metaphors.
Rightio. Kia kaha, stay beautiful. Spread the peace, love, and positivity throughout your little world. And we'll be back for another episode of the Nishcast. Cheer.